The evening sun bled across the terracotta rooftops of Seville, painting the sky in hues of apricot and rose. Inside our home, the air, thick with the scent of jasmine from the patio garden and the lingering aroma of the tortilla Javier had just finished, felt deceptively peaceful. We were sitting in the salon, the tall shutters opened just enough to let in the gentle breeze, the day's oppressive heat finally beginning to relent. Javier was talking about his day at the architecture firm, his voice a low, familiar rumble that usually soothed me. Tonight, it was merely the prelude to a shockwave. He paused, taking a sip of his Tinto di Verano. "Elena," he began, not looking at me directly, his gaze fixed on the intricate tile pattern on the floor. "I need to tell you something." My stomach tightened. This was never a good opener. "Yes, Javier?" I prompted, setting down my book, the story of a woman finding her own way suddenly feeling prescient. He finally met my eyes, and the usual warmth was clouded with something I couldn't quite decipher. Guilt? Apprehension? "It's about Sophia." My heart gave a small, unwelcome lurch. Sophia. His ex-wife. The ghost that occasionally drifted through our lives in the form of a shared child support payment or an awkward holiday greeting. We'd been married for 5 years, and while the topic of his previous marriage wasn't strictly forbidden, it wasn't a comfortable one. We had built our life, our home, our quiet happiness here, brick by sun-baked brick, intentionally separate from the echoes of the past. "What about Sophia?" I asked, my voice carefully neutral. He shifted in his chair, leaning forward. She's in a very bad situation. Really dire. She lost her job, her apartment, she's been ill." He spoke quickly, as if trying to get the words out before I could react. "She has nowhere else to go." A cold dread began to pool in my veins. "Nowhere else? What do you mean?" He took a deep breath. "I told her she could stay with us. Just for a little while. Until she gets back on her feet." The world tilted. The scent of jasmine became cloying, the gentle breeze suddenly felt like a harsh wind. "You what?" I managed, the words barely a whisper. My voice was shaking. "Elena, please," he rushed on, holding up a hand as if to ward off my reaction. "She's desperate. She has no family here. Her parents are in Galicia, too old to help. Her friends, she says they can't take her in." "Javier," I said, finding my voice, though it was sharper now, laced with disbelief and a rising tide of fury. "You told your ex-wife she could move in with us? Without asking me? Without even talking to me about it?" "It was a crisis," he insisted, his own voice rising slightly. "I couldn't just leave her on the street. She was crying, she was so lost." "And what about me?" I demanded, standing up now, pacing a few steps across the cool tile floor. "What about our home? Our life? This isn't just your decision to make. This is our house, Javier. We built this together." He stood too, reaching for me, but I flinched away. "You have to understand, Elena. It's temporary. A few weeks, maybe a month. She's been through so much. Understand?" The word was a bitter taste in my mouth. "Understand that you made a life-altering decision about our shared space, our privacy, our marriage, and didn't feel the need to consult me? Understand that you prioritized your ex-wife's needs over discussing this with your wife?" My hands were clenched into fists, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The soft evening light now seemed harsh, exposing the sudden chasm that had opened between us. "How could you do this, Javier? How could you just assume this was okay?" He looked genuinely frustrated now, running a hand through his dark hair. "Because it's the right thing to do. She needs help. I thought you'd see that. The right thing to do is unilateral decision-making that impacts both of us profoundly?" I countered, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "The right thing to do is to invite the woman you were married to into the home you share with your current wife, without a word of warning?" He fell silent, the weight of my words landing between us. Outside, a group of people were laughing loudly as they walked down the street, their joy a stark contrast to the heavy, suffocating tension in our living room. The air no longer smelled of jasmine and tortilla, but of betrayal and the sudden, terrifying instability of the life I thought I knew. Sophia wasn't just a ghost anymore, she was a looming presence, about to cross our threshold and shatter the peace I had so carefully cultivated. And I was supposed to just understand. The apricot and rose sunset faded into a bruised twilight, but the chill in our salon had nothing to do with the temperature dropping. Javier retreated to his study, leaving me alone with the echo of his words and the deafening silence between us. My mind raced, a whirlwind of anger, hurt, and panicked questions. Could I refuse? Could I make him tell her no? The thought flickered briefly before I remembered Javier's determined expression, his insistence that it was the right thing. He hadn't asked, he had informed. He had made a decision that cleaved through the foundation of our marriage like a careless pickaxe. The next few days were a blur of strained silence and forced normalcy. We ate dinner, pretending not to see the chasm between us. Javier avoided my gaze, talking about work with an unnatural enthusiasm. I responded in monosyllables, my heart a cold stone in my chest. The jasmine still bloomed on the patio, but its perfume now felt like a cruel mockery of the sweetness that had vanished from our home. I felt like an uninvited guest in my own life, waiting for the real intrusion to begin. It came on a Tuesday afternoon. The doorbell rang, a sharp, unwelcome sound. Javier answered it before I could even move from the kitchen, where I was attempting to distract myself by chopping vegetables with excessive force. I heard muffled voices, the scrape of luggage, and then Javier's voice, unnecessarily bright, "Elena? Sophia's here." I walked into the salon, wiping my hands on a towel, my heart pounding. Sophia stood just inside the door, a small suitcase at her feet. She was thinner than I remembered, her face pale, eyes shadowed. She looked fragile. Dressed in simple, slightly worn clothes, she seemed vulnerable, lost. Javier stood beside her, a solicitous hand on her arm, looking from her to me with a strained expression that pleaded for understanding. "Hola, Elena," Sophia murmured, her voice soft, almost apologetic. "Hola, Sophia," I managed, my voice flat. I couldn't muster warmth, couldn't feign welcome. The sight of her standing in my hallway, invited by my husband without my consent, felt like a physical blow. Javier quickly stepped in. "I'll show you to the spare room, Sophia. It's already made up." He picked up her suitcase, leading her down the hall towards the small bedroom we usually used for occasional guests, a room I had always thought of as ours, available to the people we chose to invite. Watching them disappear down the corridor, a wave of nausea washed over me. This was real. She was here. In our home. The fragile, pale woman Javier felt such a profound, unquestioning obligation to help, even at the cost of blindsiding his wife. Life immediately shifted into an awkward, uncomfortable rhythm. Shared breakfasts where silence stretched, punctuated only by the clinking of cutlery. Evenings where Sophia sat quietly in the corner of the salon, reading or looking out the window, her presence a constant, heavy weight. Javier tried too hard, making small talk, asking Sophia if she needed anything, fetching her drinks. Each act of attention, no matter how small, felt like a tiny betrayal, a reinforcement of where his priorities lay, at least in that moment. One evening, Javier decided to cook cocido, a hearty stew. It was one of his specialties, a dish he rarely made because it was so time-consuming. As the rich aroma filled the house, he mentioned, "Sophia always loved my cocido." The casual remark landed like a stone in my chest. It wasn't malicious, not overtly, but it was a clear, painful reminder of their shared past, of a domestic intimacy I was not a part of, now juxtaposed against the stark absence of intimacy between Javier and me. We hadn't had a proper conversation, let alone shared a moment of connection, since he dropped his bombshell. I felt like an outsider in my own kitchen, smelling a meal cooked not just for us, but for a ghost from his past who was now sitting at our table. Later that night, lying in bed beside Javier, the distance between us felt immense, wider than the Atlantic. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of another person settling down in the next room. The comforting familiarity of our home had evaporated, replaced by a constant, grating tension. I closed my eyes, the image of Sophia's fragile face superimposed on the image of Javier's solicitous one, and the understanding he demanded felt further away than ever. I was drowning in resentment, and there seemed to be no shore in sight. The resentment had become a physical weight, heavy in my chest, making each breath shallow. Days bled into weeks, marked by the silent tension at the dinner table and the perpetual awareness of Sophia's presence in the next room. I felt like a character in a play I hadn't auditioned for, forced to share the stage in my own home. Javier seemed trapped too, caught between my palpable hurt and his perceived duty to Sophia. The understanding he demanded remained stubbornly out of reach for me, replaced by a cold, hard knot of betrayal. The turning point wasn't a dramatic confrontation, but a quiet afternoon. I watched Javier help Sophia with her laptop, leaning close, their heads together, the easy familiarity a stark contrast to the distance that had grown between us. In that moment, I didn't feel anger, I felt utterly erased. Invisible. It was a hollow, terrifying feeling. Later, standing alone in our bedroom, I looked at my reflection, tired eyes, a strange smile I hadn't realized I was wearing. This wasn't living. This was surviving, and barely. Something shifted inside me. A flicker of defiance, a spark of self-preservation. I wouldn't be invisible anymore. I started small. I began taking long walks in the late afternoon, leaving the house just as the sun began its descent. I rediscovered the winding, fragrant alleys of the Santa Cruz neighborhood, the hidden patios bursting with flowers, the sound of fountains a soothing counterpoint to the turmoil in my mind. I sat in sun-drenched plazas, sipping café con leche, simply existing in the vibrant life of the city that had always felt like home, but which I had allowed my domestic crisis to overshadow. One evening, drawn by the rhythmic intensity, I found myself at a small tableau for a flamenco performance. The raw emotion of the singer's voice, the dancer's fierce, passionate movements, the guitarist's soulful melody, it resonated deep within me. It was pain, yes, but also resilience, a defiant beauty forged in hardship. Watching the dancer stomp her feet, expressing sorrow and strength in equal measure, I felt a connection, a recognition. I realized my own pain didn't have to break me, it could fuel me. Returning home that night, something had changed. The air inside still held tension, but my reaction was different. I felt steadier, less reactive. I initiated a conversation with Javier, not in a fit of anger, but with a quiet, unwavering resolve. I didn't yell or accuse. I simply stated my truth. Javier, I said, my voice calm but firm, when you invited Sophia into our home without asking me, you didn't just disrespect me, you showed me that you don't see our life together as a partnership where fundamental decisions are made together. You broke my trust. I laid bare the hurt, the feeling of being marginalized in my own home, the damage his actions had caused to us. I told him I couldn't live like this indefinitely, that I needed him to truly understand the consequences, not just intellectually, but emotionally. He finally listened. Really listened. The defensiveness I had seen before was gone, replaced by a dawning, painful realization in his eyes. He saw the depth of my hurt, the toll it had taken. He apologized, truly apologized, acknowledging that his sense of duty had overridden his responsibility to our marriage and to me. Simultaneously, Sophia, perhaps sensing the shift in the household dynamic or genuinely starting to recover, began making her own plans. She had been quietly looking for work and a place to stay, and within another week, she found a small studio apartment not far away. Her departure, when it came, was quiet and understated. There were no grand goodbyes, just a simple thank you and the soft click of the front door closing behind her. the house felt different immediately. Lighter. The silence that returned wasn't empty, it was peaceful. The road to repairing my marriage with Javier would be long, marked by the scar of his betrayal and the trust that needed to be painstakingly rebuilt. But as I stood on the patio, breathing in the sweet scent of jasmine under the vast Andalusian sky, I knew I wasn't the same woman who had crumpled at his words weeks ago. I had faced adversity, not just from outside, but from within the walls of my own home, and I had found my resilience. I had rediscovered my own strength, my own voice, and my own place in the world, a place that was defined by me, not by my husband's actions or anyone else's presence. The understanding Javier had demanded had ultimately led me to understand myself, and in that understanding, I found my freedom. If you liked it, subscribe to the channel and enjoy these other amazing stories.